Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I want to welcome everybody to Live in Hope, Focus on Healing, part of the MS&Me Radio Network. My name is Kelly Alderton. I'm a wife, mom, a motivational speaker, entrepreneur, and I'm an author. My book, Waking Up from MS, My Journey to Health, Healing, and Living Symptom-Free, details my almost 30-year journey living with and beating multiple sclerosis. I am so excited to be a part of the MS&Me Radio Network and bringing you information on how you too can deal with your MS naturally. My guest on the call tonight is Sharon Hoy from Ireland, and Sharon and I connected years ago on this journey to really finding out better ways to deal with our MS, finding more natural ways to deal with MS. And Sharon, welcome to the broadcast.
Thank you, Kelly. Lovely to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sharon, can you give us an introduction of your journey to diagnosis with MS? You know, what led up to that, and really how you came about dealing with your MS in a more natural way? Because I know you have a fantastic story.
Sure. So I was my first symptoms were in 2008. I started to trip. I actually fell and broke my arm. Long story short, I developed some really strange symptoms, tingling in my legs, extreme fatigue, and a loss of concentration. And after about 3 weeks of having these symptoms constantly, and no matter how much rest I got in those 3 weeks, I went to bed tired, I woke up tired. I eventually, at the end of the 3 weeks, everything lifted like a fog clearing, and it was as though nothing had happened. But because my father had MS, I sort of started to think, perhaps I should have this investigated further. And I went to my GP, who referred me to a neurologist. It didn't take me too seriously at the time, but I was persistent, and he eventually agreed to an MRI brain scan, which was conducted a short time later. And within a matter of weeks, I was being advised that the diagnosis was probably MS, but I would need a lumbar puncture to confirm that working diagnosis. But in fact, the brain scan revealed, basically, one doctor just said you have a load of white matter damage all across your brain. It's like a snowstorm, was how it was described to me. So I went for the lumbar puncture, and I suppose really then the next thing was I wasn't too happy with the neurologist. So I changed to another neurologist, and we had further investigations done at that point. He came back and told me that it seemed as though from one blood test that I did not have MS, but I did in fact have a disease called neuromyelitis optica. And when I read up about that, I realised that MS was a better option if I had to have a choice between the two diagnoses. Mm-hmm. That neurologist told me on my first consultation after the blood test came back positive for NMO, I'll refer to it now, neuromyelitis optica. He told me that I had at the most 10 years to live. He said within 5 years I would be in a wheelchair and I would have no movement from the chest down, and by 50 I would be dead because I would probably suffocate because my diaphragm would stop working.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I think from then I went into a state of confusion and depression. I didn't think to look for natural ways to do anything with this at all. So grim was the prognosis, and in fact I started to go downhill very quickly, which I now in retrospect attribute to probably the most of it, if not all of it, to stress.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
So Then fast forward another 3 or 4 years, and the neurologist was just I didn't find him very helpful in relation to physical symptoms, emotional stress, or anything at all. There was no help from him whatsoever. It's just all very negative. So my doctor suggested that I switch to another neurologist who had a particular interest in multiple sclerosis, but felt that the change might be a good idea to have a second opinion. So when I went to see the second neurologist, the blood tests were repeated, and the blood test for the protein in the blood that would indicate neuromyelitis optica came back negative. I had another test done just to make sure, and it also came back negative.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there were some other tests done to test cognition and so on. I think it's called an EFT test, Kelly,
Yes.
or something. Yeah, I had that done also, which came back a positive result for not a very serious problem, but there was some minor damage there that was reflected in that test. And my consultant ordered another brain scan, which I had done. She compared that one with the first one that I had done all those years previous, and she concluded that I had multiple sclerosis, and that was in 2012.
So you went from 2008 to 2012 now with the MS diagnosis, so probably thinking right from the get-go you had MS? Is that what they were thinking?
Yes, I believe that I did have, because my father had MS. I had done research on the correlation between a parent or
Sure.
a sibling having an MS and the likelihood that, you might have it yourself.
Sure.
And not just my father, but he was one of 9. And out of that family of 9, 5 of them have had, since his diagnosis all those years ago, have subsequently been diagnosed with MS also. So for me to be told that it was something else, and I did ask at the time, look, can you repeat the blood test? Because I'm not convinced.
Right.
There's far too much MS in my family just to be satisfied with one blood test. And I was told there's no such thing as a false positive. There is no point in doing a second blood test. Now, this guy was a very strong character, this consultant, and I was severely weakened by the time I went to see him emotionally. So, I just was not strong enough to really persist with that request for a second blood test at that time. I was just not in a good place.
So you were diagnosed officially in 2012, and you weren't doing very well now, because obviously that's 4 years later, right?
Absolutely.
And where were you at the diagnosis? What were your symptoms? How were you feeling? And then how did they start to treat you?
Yeah, so I was into a wheelchair by the time I was properly diagnosed with MS, and I was just so relieved. It was almost a sense of euphoria that I had got answers here, and I can deal with this because I know what to expect now. And the prognosis wasn't so grim, even though I wasn't in a very good physical state. It wasn't a death sentence per se. So I was so relieved, and within a matter of days, I was in an MS nurse clinic, and they were very insistent. You need to get on an MS drug. You need to do it sooner rather than later. So I went along with that flow of their advice, and within, I think, a week, I had all the information home with me, and I decided, yes, I will go on the recommended drug. So I started to inject with Avonex, I think, within about 10 days.
And how were you, so you, of course, that's the first thing they always tell us, right? You got to get it on DMD sooner than later, because otherwise you're going to end up in a wheelchair and yada, the whole spiel that we get. So you didn't know any better at that time. You, of course, were going off of what your trusted healthcare advisors were telling you. So you got on the Avonex, the injections, and how did you do on them?
Well, that's the really interesting part of all this. Within about 8 months of starting to inject weekly with Avonex, I had gone really downhill very, very quickly, very severely. I had 3 bedridden relapses. The last relapse I had was in the January, 8 months after I had commenced injecting Avonex. And I remember lying in bed and thinking, halfway through that I think it was 5 weeks altogether I was in bed for. And the third week I thought, well, there's got to be something more here that I can do. There's got to be something better because this isn't working. I'm getting worse. And on top of that, I had the very obvious flu-like symptom side effects from Avonex. So I lost about 36 hours to 48 hours a week out of my life, just dealing with those flu-like symptoms from the Avonex itself. Plus the MS was severely exacerbated by this stage. And my husband and I had a conversation, and I said, I'm going to do some research. So, which I did. And first of all, I found OMS, Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis, Dr. George Jelenic. And then I found Dr. Roy Swank's information online also. I sent off for the books. I reached out to the OMS team. And by the time I come out of bed, almost 3 weeks later, still with symptoms and still very, very fatigued, but certainly able to move about, my husband and I just went through the kitchen, all the larders, and we cleared out all the foods that we had come to know from the research were pro-inflammatory, and we did a complete new shop, and we introduced foods into our diet that are known to fight inflammation and that are generally healthy. I should say that we already had what we believed a healthy diet, but obviously not in terms of what I needed for my particular circumstances. So there was a lot changed at that point,
Sharon,
coming out of that bedridden relapse.
Sharon, let's talk about that a little bit, because you looked for information on another way, and you found the Overcoming MS, all their information, MS diet and everything, and then what Dr. Roy Swank came up with. And I need to tell everybody, there is scientific research, long-standing scientific research behind this information. It's not just where someone says, oh, take this, take that, and we don't have anything backing it up. We, in fact, do. But Dr. Swank's information and then Dr. Jelenic's information, just kind of an update to that. We have proof that this works, and we know the diet has a 95% success rate in helping people with their MS. So you really fell into some great information, because a lot of people don't find this information out right away. So please continue about once you started on the Swank diet.
Sure. Well, first of all, I started on overcoming MS on their diet, and I just went the whole thing at the start. I cut out gluten. I was very, very strict at the start. I cut out dairy, which to this day I don't touch cow's milk or anything like that. I started to feel better very, very quickly. I think by April, so about 2.5 months later, I stopped. I had the courage built up that I stopped injecting with Avonex. The concern was that, well, I suppose I didn't really have the courage to actually stop injecting. And at the point when I felt stronger and I realized the diet was working, I thought, well, hey ho, I've got nothing to lose here. Let's stop the injections and see what happens.
Sharon, can I interject something really quick? At this point, after you looked at that information 3 weeks later, were you in a wheelchair at that point?
Yes.
You were? Yeah. Okay.
I was, yeah. And in the April when I stopped injecting, I was still in that wheelchair.
Okay.
And this is really interesting as well. And it's really important to say that, well, first, two things. First of all, I injected on a Wednesday. And so the Wednesday that I plucked up the courage not to inject, the Thursday morning when I woke up and started to move about, part of my daily routine, I immediately felt better.
Wow.
And that was from the very first day of not injecting. And it was more than not having to deal with the sort of expected symptoms. It was much more than that. It was just, I felt it just a change in my body. I felt a little bit stronger. Secondly, I stayed off the injections of the Avonex, and by the beginning of July, I got out of the wheelchair.
Wow. So just a few
Yeah,
months later, you were able to,
absolutely.
oh, wow, that is so
Yeah.
amazing.
And when I look back on it, yes, I did have success in the first 2.5 months or so from introducing a healthy MS sort of focused diet. It really wasn't until I stopped injecting that I noticed a significant improvement in my health. And it really, rather than kind of at the beginning, I think that I might have halted progression or at least stopped the exacerbations. But at the point when I stopped injecting, I kind of look back on it and I see it as the time when really I started to reverse the damage in my body and in my brain also.
Because you stopped the injection, so you stopped kind of suppressing that immune system and putting the other
Absolutely.
chemicals in your body, and you focused on healing. See, that's the thing. Our body, God made such an amazing body, didn't He? It's made to
That's right.
heal if we give it the tools and the resources to do
That's
so. And
right.
that's exactly
And
what you were focusing on.
And if you look around, Kelly, at much of what we do in produce, well, I'll just give two examples. Vegetables that we would, raw vegetables that we would use for juicing, and ginger as a root that we would use, and I put that in my juices every day. Turmeric. All those kind of things are all natural that God put on this earth. And everything is there. The Creator has made those things as He has us. And so everything is there that we can avail of to do our utmost to really do our bit to set the wheels in motion to actually get better.
Absolutely. And Sharon, so you were starting to feel better. You got out of the wheelchair. What other things were you doing? So you've got the healthy diet, and for our listeners, I know a lot of people will say, "Oh, healthy diet, that's too hard." This is really a lifestyle.
Absolutely.
It's a lifestyle. You can't look that you're taking away from your life. You're actually giving yourself life. You're healing your body and just doing it in a natural way. This is the normal way it's supposed to be. Processed foods and all these chemical laden foods, that is not natural, right? So
Absolutely.
that's what we have to
Absolutely.
look
Yeah.
at.
Yeah, and my consultant that I now have, the one that actually did me the favor in 2012 and ordered all the repeats of all the tests and so on. She is still my consultant neurologist now, even though I don't do a thing that she tells me to do. So she told me that she respects me. She told me that she admires me. This was long after I had got out of the wheelchair. I went onto a stick, and then eventually the stick was thrown in the corner also. And she takes note of my supplements rather than anything else, and I think that's pretty unique.
Yes.
I'm sure there are other people out there that have had this experience, but it's hard work to get that to that point where you convince your consultant neurologist that you're taking this holistic path, and for them to actually stay with you and to travel that journey with you. And I just think it's so important to say that we need to stay focused and to do the research. I mean, I was very weak at the point that I was researching. I was in bed with that bedridden relapse, and it was a very low point in my life. But when I look back on it, that really was what set me up to get better to where I am today. And I think it's just so important to say that we need to really look at what we're doing and how can we do that differently. And really to, my consultant, just this is as an aside, my consultant said to me long after we had ironed out the fact that I was not going to take drugs and she would still be my consultant and so on. I said to her, why do you not suggest diet, even as part of what you offer to people? Why do you not, at no point in the time since I have met you, have you ever said to me in a consultation that, yes, there's this drug A, B, or C, but you could also look at your diet. What's your diet like, Sharon? I said, you never asked me that question. And she said, Sharon, we don't ask that question because we know that if we do, people generally won't stick to it. They'll go straight for the drug because that's the easy option.
Sure, it's a quick fix, and everybody is unfortunately
Yeah,
looking for a quick fix. But what we need to say is that your MS diagnosis, what was the end result, or is the end result of years of the body breaking down.
absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you have to get back in repair mode and healing
That's
mode.
right. And that takes work. The quick fix just leads to more damage and leads to despair, despondency, and more disability.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Sharon, what other things are you doing? We know you're on the OMS diet. You've been doing so well at it. You're healing, repairing your body. What other things are you doing to help you on this journey?
Yes. Well, now I about 8 months after I started the diet, I dropped the gluten-free thing, and I only have wheat that is organic, so I bake my own bread where I can, and so on. So only organic wheat. I'm convinced that the pesticides and herbicides in the flour is what is causing the problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, if you're diagnosed as celiac, absolutely follow the advice given and avoid gluten, but otherwise maybe just think about whether or not to be so strict,
Sure.
because I found that very restrictive, that aspect. So just moving on from that, I just wanted to mention that. What else am I doing, Kelly? I take a lot of supplements. I also see a chiropractor regularly. I make sure my spine is being taken care of, and I get massage to make sure that the muscles are working properly and can give the spine the best chance possible to stay in that alignment that the chiropractor has managed to work for me within my spine. And I exercise as well.
Exercise too, good. And Sharon, what are you doing? Obviously life is busy. I know you're in university again, and you've got so much going on in your life. How do you deal with stress? How do you keep yourself stress-free, or dealing with your stress in a way so it does not compound any effects, that we know can sometimes happen when we're stressed, and we can get some symptoms? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, that's really important, and I think it's probably the most important aspect of this whole journey is my. So I'm a Christian. I'm a born again Christian, and my faith in the Lord. So, many people will say you need to meditate and so on. So, yes, I meditate, but my meditation is my prayer time with the Lord. And that's what I do. I know that there's a greater power than me, and that I serve a risen Savior and a sovereign God. And my time and my life is in His hands, and I trust Him with that. And that mitigates so much stress as well, because we can pray to Him and leave it with Him. Not take it back again, but leave it with Him and just trust in Him for our lives and our future. So yeah, that I would say that's a big part of my daily life is talking to God and just making sure that my life and my thoughts and my behavior are aligned with what's expected of me as a Christian wife and friend.
Amazing. And that's so important. You're right. It is of the utmost important on this journey. Now, Sharon, we just have a couple of minutes left here. And for someone who might be listening and maybe is on one of the ABC drugs, or who knows, the other slew of DMDs that we have right now, what would be the first thing you would tell them to do right at this point? Because again, this could be something all brand new, just like you found out by your own investigation. What would you tell somebody who is interested in looking at another way to deal with their MS? What would you tell them right now?
Yes, well, do the research. Don't be coerced or rushed into making a decision for drugs. There is a lot of pressure when you first are passed around a multidiscipline team within that hospital. You have your neurologist, you have your nurses and so on, MS nurses. Don't be pressured into making a decision for a drug. Remove yourself from that environment. Take yourself home and speak to your family and do the research. Speak to someone like yourself, Kelly, absolutely. And definitely get all the information in and go to the OMS website and look at the doctor's diet as well, and all the research that he did over a 34-year period, and the controlled group that he had to show how his results were absolutely scientifically backed up, and just really get all that information in first of all, and then look at the drugs and the side effects, and speak to other people like myself. And since 2012, I've never even been close to suspecting that I'm going into another relapse. I walk daily. I spend a lot of energy just thinking and working out and doing things. And I'm a very, very busy person. And yes, I'm in a postgrad course as well. And I'm a wife and I have a family here. So yeah. If I can do it, anyone can do it. I did it coming out of a relapse while I was still in bed. If I can do it at that point, knowing I was getting out and into a wheelchair, then you can do it as well. Just have faith in yourself and bring your family in on it as well, and get them behind you to support you, and explain to them why you're doing what you're doing and how you've got to that, arrived at that point where you've got the courage to do it. So share with them along that journey, and they'll support you in that.
Absolutely. Sharon, thank you so much. This is just an
You're
amazing message that you have today. And I want to tell people a few more points of information. You can go on Facebook to the Overcoming MS Diet. That's on there, or it's just Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis. You can find all the information there. You can also go and look for the information on Dr. Roy Swank. There is so much information at your fingertips right now for you to take a different path with your own life and your journey with MS. Sharon has done it. I've done it. I'm living healthy, strong, and symptom-free well over 14 years. And that's how we know, Sharon, right? That
Absolutely.
We know other people can do it. We did it. Everybody else can do the same thing. You just got to find your pieces of the puzzle. But the great thing is we have that information available to us right now. So,
Absolutely.
Sharon, thank you so much for being a blessing to other people. And I just know
You're
this
welcome,
broadcast is going to help so many people. And I want to thank everybody for listening today to Live in Hope, Focus on Healing, part of the MS&Me Radio Network. And I just want to wish you all have a great day and God bless. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.